Fire skies on fire. History is not made in press conferences. It is made in bunkers, in cockpits, in the trembling hands of a radar operator at 3 a.m. who has 6 seconds to decide whether to fire. Part 1. The Last Normal Night. Chapter 1. Raz's Window. Dubai, UAE, February 27th, 2026, 11:58 p.m. Raza Mahmood had worked 12-hour shifts at the Al Quaz construction site for 3 years without a single day off. Tonight, he had treated himself to a can of Pepsi, a bag of chips from the corner store, and 30 minutes of a Pakistani drama on his phone before sleep. He was 4 minutes from unconsciousness when the window shattered. Not cracked, not rattled, shattered. The entire frame blown inward by a pressure wave that had no business existing on a Tuesday night in the most peaceful city in the world. He hit the floor by instinct, chips scattering across the linoleum, phone still playing the drama's romantic theme song. A cruel irony, as the ceiling light swung violently on its cord. Then came the sound. Not one boom. 3, each one closer than the last, rolling across the Dubai skyline like thunder from a god who had lost his patience. Raza crawled to the broken window on his hands and knees, cutting his palm on a shard of glass without noticing. He looked up. The sky was on fire. Not metaphorically, not poetically. The actual sky above the city, the dark velvet canopy that he had stared at 1,000 nights wondering about his family back in Lahore, was streaked with white light, orange explosions, and the crisscross trails of things moving faster than his eyes could follow. His phone buzzed. An alert in Arabic, then English. Warning: hostile aerial threat detected. Seek shelter immediately. Do not approach impact sites. Raza stared at the message for a long moment. Then he did something that would later seem both foolish and profoundly human. He called his mother. Chapter 2. The General's Breakfast. Tehran, Iran, February 28th, 2026, 4:14 a.m. General Hossein Salami had not slept. He sat in the underground command center beneath the Alborz Mountains, a cup of tea growing cold beside a map that no civilian would ever see, watching the screens with the practiced stillness of a man who had spent 40 years preparing for a moment he had always known would come. The phone call had arrived at 2:47 a.m. 3 words from the field commander in the air. The eagle fell. Salami had closed his eyes for exactly 4 seconds. Then he had opened them, set down his tea, and said the 7 words that would change the Middle East forever. Activate Operation True Promise 4. Now, the room had gone very quiet. Not the quiet of hesitation. The quiet of men who understood the weight of what they were about to do, and had decided collectively and without flinching to do it anyway. Buttons were pressed. Coordinates were confirmed. And somewhere in the Iranian desert, in hidden silos that had taken 2 decades to build, missiles older than some of the men in the room began their final countdown. The supreme leader was dead. The world was about to find out what that meant. Chapter 3. Sarah's Last Shift. Dubai International Airport, February 28th, 2026, 5:30 a.m. Sarah Pereira was 45 minutes from the end of her overnight shift at Gate D14 when the airport went dark. Not completely dark. The emergency generators kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing the terminal in a sickly amber glow that made every passenger look slightly jaundiced. But in those 3 seconds of total blackness, the terminal had transformed from a mundane collection of tired travelers into something primal and afraid. A baby screamed, then stopped, then screamed again. Someone shouted in Tagalog. Someone else answered in Hindi. A German businessman stood up from his chair and looked around with the particular bewilderment of a man whose world has always been orderly and is only now, at age 52, beginning to understand that it never actually was. Sarah's radio crackled. All ground staff, this is Operations Control. We are implementing Emergency Protocol Delta. Do not, repeat, do not move any aircraft from gates. Keep all passengers inside the terminal. This is not a drill. She had been trained for this. Every airport employee had been trained for this. But training happened in bright conference rooms with PowerPoint slides and catered sandwiches, not at 5:30 in the morning in an amber-lit terminal with a baby screaming and a German businessman looking at her like she personally owed him an explanation. She straightened her uniform jacket, picked up her radio, and walked toward the window. Outside, 2 kilometers from the runway, a column of black smoke was rising slowly into the pre-dawn sky. Part 2, The Machine War. Chapter 4, The Algorithm That Saves Cities. Saudi Air Defense Command, Riyadh, March 1st, 2026, 2 a.m. Captain Khalid Al-Otaibi had a philosophy about his job. "I don't fight wars," he had told his younger brother once, over dinner. "I manage mathematics." His brother, who studied literature at King Saud University, had found this deeply unromantic. Khalid found it deeply accurate, because what happened in the bunker 40 meters beneath the Saudi Defense Ministry was not, in any emotional sense, a battle. It was a calculation. A continuous, brutal, high-speed calculation conducted partly by humans and mostly by machines that had been trained on every missile trajectory ever recorded, every intercept ever attempted, every failure ever documented. The AI didn't feel fear. It didn't feel urgency. It didn't feel anything. It simply looked at an incoming object, mass, velocity, trajectory, altitude, and answered one question within human speed. Can we stop it? If yes, which battery, which angle, which moment of intercept? If no, evacuation recommendation, impact prediction, casualty estimate. Tonight, the system had been answering yes for 6 hours straight. Khalid watched the screens with a coffee cup in one hand and a pencil in the other. The pencil a nervous habit from his academy days, something to do with his hands while the machines did the actual work. The screens showed Riyadh from above, a glowing grid of streets and buildings, with incoming threats rendered as red dots and defensive intercepts as blue lines. Red dot appears. Blue line fires. Red dot disappears. Red dot appears. Blue line fires. Red dot disappears. It had a rhythm to it, almost hypnotic, like watching rain fall and evaporate before it hits the ground. Almost, because Khalid knew what each red dot actually was. He knew the weight of the warhead. He knew the radius of destruction if it got through. He knew that somewhere in the city above him, in the apartment buildings and the shopping malls and the hospitals and the schools, 8 million people were sleeping or trying to sleep, trusting that the mathematics would hold. His radio crackled. 4 inbound, north-northwest, range 140 kilometers, time to intercept window 90 seconds. Khalid set down his coffee. Confirmed, he said. Engage all 4. The algorithm was already ahead of him. Chapter 5, What Fell from the Sky. Diplomatic Quarter, Riyadh, March 18th, 2026, 9:17 p.m. Ambassador Leyla Mansouri of Turkey had seen a great many things in 23 years of diplomatic service. She had negotiated in rooms where men lied to her face with great charm. She had attended funerals for colleagues killed in conflicts that her government had tried and failed to prevent. She had once spent 4 days in a Yemeni hotel with no power and a civil war happening outside her window, surviving on crackers and mineral water and a dog-eared copy of Orhan Pamuk. But she had never, in 23 years, been inside a building when missiles were intercepted directly overhead. The emergency summit had been going for 40 minutes. The room was full. Foreign ministers and their deputies from Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Pakistan, Syria, the UAE, and Azerbaijan. The Saudi foreign minister was speaking carefully and precisely about the need for a unified regional position when the first boom hit. The chandelier swayed. A water glass slid 3 centimeters across the polished table. Every person in the room went completely still. The second boom was louder. The third, closer. The fourth rattled the windows in their frames, and caused the Egyptian foreign minister to grip the edge of the table with both hands, a gesture that Layla noted with a diplomat's eye because he was not a man who showed fear easily. Then silence. The Saudi protocol officer by the door touched his earpiece, listened for 10 seconds, and said, with a composure that Layla would later describe as extraordinary, "For missiles, all intercepted. No casualties. The minister may continue." Nobody moved for a moment. Then the Saudi foreign minister straightened his papers, looked up at the room, and said, "Gentlemen, ladies, this is precisely why we are here." Part 3, The Human Equation. Chapter 6, The Schoolgirls of Minab. Minab, Iran, March 2026. Her name was Fatima. She was 11 years old, and she wanted to be a doctor. Not because anyone had told her to, not because it was expected, but because she had watched her grandmother suffer through an illness that a better hospital might have caught earlier. And she had decided, with the absolute certainty that only 11-year-olds possess, that she would fix that. She had a backpack with a broken zipper that she safety-pinned shut every morning. She had a best friend named Nasreen who was better at math. She had a habit of drawing flowers in the margins of her notebooks when the lesson moved too slowly. She walked to school on a Tuesday morning in March. She did not walk home. The strike on the elementary school in Minab killed more than 170 people. Most of them were children. The international community issued statements. Investigations were demanded. Blame was assigned and disputed and reassigned. Fatima's backpack was found 3 streets away, the safety pin still holding the zipper shut. In the margins of her last notebook, half finished, a flower. Chapter 7, The Oil That Stopped Moving. Strait of Hormuz, March 2026. The Pacific Harmony was a supertanker the length of 4 football fields, carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil from Kuwait to South Korea. She had made this journey 11 times in the past 2 years without incident. On March 12th, her captain received orders to hold position. He was not alone. 43 other supertankers sat in a queue outside the Strait of Hormuz like enormous metal beads on a string, engines idling, crews watching the news on their phones, waiting for someone somewhere to decide that it was safe to move. Nobody decided that. In Tokyo, fuel prices rose 34% overnight. In Berlin, emergency cabinet meetings discussed rationing. In New York, the stock market fell 1,100 points in a single session, and then fell again the next day. The world had always known that the Strait of Hormuz was the jugular vein of the global economy. It just hadn't believed, until now, that someone would actually cut it. Part 4, The Reckoning. Chapter 8, What the Algorithm Cannot Count. Riyadh, Dubai, Tehran, Minab, March 2026. I am a narrator of this story. I am not human. I do not bleed. I do not grieve. I do not lie awake at 3 a.m. listening for the sound of sirens. I am a thing that tracks the missiles. The thing that calculates intercept windows. The thing that processes satellite images and battle damage assessments and casualty reports, reducing the full catastrophe of human conflict into numbers